Now, hours after External Affairs Minister Dr. SJaishankar met US Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Washington, the External Affairs Minister has also confirmed at the Hudson Institute event that Canada was discussed in the meeting with the US Secretary of State and US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Dr. SJaishankar addressed this issue during a discussion in Washington, D.C., asserting that the accusations levelled against India were inconsistent with its policies. He also extended an offer to investigate any specific concerns if provided by the Canadian government, while reiterating that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's allegation of a potential India link in Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar's killing was not New Delhi's policy. The External Affairs Minister also said he told his high-level American interlocutors, including NSA Jake Sullivan and Secretary of State Antony Blinken, that it was in fact Ottawa's permissive attitude that has given space to organized crime from India, which has got mixed up with trafficking, separatism, violence, even terrorism. Additionally, he lamented the safety concerns of Indian diplomats stationed in Canada, citing public intimidation of diplomats as a reason for temporarily suspending visa services. Dr. Jaishankar also took a veiled jibe at Pakistan, saying that SAARC is dormant because one of its members thinks that it can spread terrorism without any cost. Interestingly, the External Affairs Minister did not name Pakistan. Let's also listen in to what he has to say.
Today, I am actually in a situation where my diplomats are unsafe going to the embassy or to the consulates.
In Canada?
In Canada. They are publicly intimidated. And that has actually compelled me to temporarily suspend even visa operations in Canada. So as I said, often countries look very different depending on how you see them and what your interests are. But I have this problem in Canada. And so your question, did I speak about it with Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken? Yes, I did. They obviously shared, US views and assessments on this whole situation. And I explained to them at some length, what I gave you was a summary of the concerns which I had. So I think hopefully we both came out of those meetings better informed.
Now, amid the diplomatic standoff with India after brazen allegations made by Justin Trudeau on separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar's killing, the Canadian Prime Minister softened his stance surprisingly a week after he failed to provide proof on his unsubstantial charge. He asserted Canada is committed to having stronger ties with India. His comment comes days after he made allegations that the Indian government was involved in the killing of K-separatist Nijjar. And speaking at a press conference in Montreal, Trudeau said while it is extremely important that Canada and its allies engage with India over the allegations of Nijjar's killing, his country would also like to work with India to strengthen bilateral ties. India is a growing economic power and important geopolitical player. And as we presented with our Indo-Pacific strategy just last year, we are very serious about building closer ties with India. This is what the Canadian Prime Minister had to say. Let's also listen in to what Trudeau said. All right, now also in an exclusive to CNN News 18, Canada's former Minister of Public Safety, Mr. Kash Heed, has condemned Canadian Prime Minister's divisive politics, this despite having no concrete evidence against India. He says Trudeau is in political trouble because his numbers are down. Listen in. But coming to India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, he's very much met the US Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken, in Washington, D.C. He's also said at Hudson Institute just a while ago that he met US NSA, Mr. Jake Sullivan, and that India is open to looking into the issue. So that's also an acknowledgement that the United States raised the Canadian matter during this meeting, even though it did not find space in the official readout. But in an already highly fragmented geopolitical climate, what should be President Joe Biden's approach towards Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who wants to transform a bilateral dispute into a multilateral one?
Well, look at both how the countries reacted. Look how Canada reacted with the inappropriate statement by the Prime Minister of Canada. And look how the United States is reacting to this. The United States wants cooperation with India with respect to this matter and other matters that may occur. That's the approach that the Prime Minister, in my opinion, should have taken to ensure that we have a cooperative relationship. If in fact some of the intelligence and the investigation, first of all, has to come up with a lot of evidence with respect to what occurred here. If in fact we needed cooperation from India on this, that's the approach we should have taken, similar to what Blinken and others in the United States have come forward with on the cooperative investigation if required.
Mr. Heed, how do you assess Canada's expectation of India to cooperate on Niger's investigation? That too, sans evidence being presented. We've not seen any come as yet. Also, when India itself has been frustrated with Canada's own ambivalence to New Delhi's repeated complaints on khalistan activity in Canada.
Well, we've had these, activists that have been in both countries that are creating some of the uncertainty with respect to the diaspora that is actually here in Canada and even in India. And we have to understand this is common practice throughout the world. It's how each country deals with it and reacts to it. If we are a country of law and order, we have to ensure that we're a country of law and order regardless of where the individual may have partaken in his activity or her activity. And I think this has to be clearly instituted within our societies, whether you're in India or whether you're in Canada. And again,
because Mr. Heed, why I'm saying that is particularly in context of not just Niger, but his lawyer also, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. You cannot go around asking Hindus living in Canada to leave Canada, go to India. And this has not been widely addressed or even discussed in Western media.
Well, and that's all part of the activism that is taking place. And that's all part of people that are digging into their particular position. We have to remember 800,000 Sikhs in Canada, they don't necessarily all agree with what is taking place right now. Sure. I certainly don't agree. And I'm from Sikh heritage. I'm not a practicing Sikh, but my parents or my grandparents are from India. And so I understand that, but I disagree with the approaches that are being taken. Many people from our community disagree with this particular approach. So we have to remember there's a slim minority that are creating the havoc between both countries right now. And for the Prime Minister to react to that slim minority is disturbing to me and others in Canada.
Right. Mr. Heed, some very interesting comments have been made by India's External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar at the Hudson Institute. He's talked about this Western construct of globalization. He said that that needs to be thought out all over again. Many in India also are asking if Justin Trudeau's accusations have made headlines, why didn't the attacks on Indian consulates get the same kind of international attention when consulates in Canada were attacked? Of course, it raises the question of whether only the security of the West matters and not nations of the global South, such as India.
Well, the whole world's security matters. And I think we've got to really pay particular attention to that. If we want to be a global society, we need to be a global society. We don't need to be our own separate entity and think that we are the rulers of whatever Western or Eastern, Southern or Northern. We have to cooperatively work together, whether we're dealing with crime issues, whether we're dealing with economies, whether we're dealing with activists, whatever the matter may be. We need more of that cooperation throughout the world. We don't need this type of positional politics that are being played out. We go to the G20 conference, we go to the world stage, we talk about cooperation, we come home and guess what? We take that divisive attitude on dealing with other important nations when in fact we don't necessarily have the concrete evidence that leads to accusing a nation such as India of being involved in this particular crime. At the end of the day, I hope we find the people that are accountable for killing Mr. Niger, but you have to let the police do their investigation. You don't have to politicize this particular murder.
Last but not least, Mr. Heed, has the standoff between Ottawa and New Delhi now become about Justin Trudeau choosing between a community that could bring him back to power versus India's national security?
Well, let me tell you right now, there are two sides to this particular story. I happen to believe that Mr. Trudeau is in political trouble right now here in Canada. Will be going to an election possibly next year, at least by the following year. Mr. Trudeau's numbers are down. Just look what happened when they recognized the Nazi fighter in Parliament the other day. You can see some of the crisis that we're facing domestically when we deal with housing, when we deal with the economy, and he's the leader of this country with no real action and plan to go forward. So of course, the political lens is going to be put on this in hopes of gaining those people to support him going forward into the next election. That's reality, and that's truthful reality. And whether you want to disagree with me or not, that's my opinion based on all of my experience, all of my studies, and my current position.